A strange ship shows up out of nowhere. No warning, no flash of light, no engine trail. It just appears sitting quietly at the edge of space, like it has been there the whole time, watching. The crew on duty checks their screens 3 times because they cannot believe what they are seeing. This ship is not on any list. It is not in any database. And when they try to talk to it, the voice that answers speaks perfect human language. But this cannot be a human ship. Humans are not allowed to build anything this strong. Not under the treaty. Not under any rule anyone signed. So what is it? And why does it feel like this one small ship is about to change everything anyone thought they knew about humanity? Out at the edge of a quiet stretch of space called the Halvor Expanse, nothing much ever happened. This part of space was so calm that most captains called it boring. And for Admiral Renseys of the Terran Defense Corps, boring was just fine. Boring meant nobody was getting hurt today. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the steadfast Coil, watching the stars turn slowly outside the window. Ren was a tall alien with pale green scales and dark ridges along his brow. Those ridges got deeper whenever he was thinking hard about something, and right now they were getting very deep because his sensor officer had just said something strange. "Say that again," Ren said. The sensor officer, a young woman named Disa, swallowed hard before she spoke again. "Sir, we have an unknown contact at the edge of our scanner range. It just appeared. There was no warp flash, no drive signal before it showed up. 1 second there was nothing there, the next second it's just there." Ren walked over to her station and looked at the screen. There was a single dot, far out past the edge of their normal patrol zone. It didn't look like much, just a small point of light on a dark screen. "Could be a sensor glitch," Ren said. "I thought so too, sir," Disa answered. "So I checked it 3 times. Same result every time." That's when the ship's science officer, a curious alien named Kella, walked over to see what all the fuss was about. Kella belonged to a species known across the galaxy for being extremely curious, sometimes a little too curious for their own good. Her antennae twitched, the way they always did when something interesting caught her attention. "Let me see the readings," she said. Dasa pulled up all the data on her screen. Kella studied it for a long moment, her mouth clicking softly the way it did when she was deep in thought. "This is odd," she finally said. "The shape of this ship doesn't match anything in our records. It's small, maybe about the size of a Corvette, but the amount of energy coming off it is way too strong for something that size. It doesn't make sense." "Could it be a new pirate ship?" Ren asked. "The Crackle Raiders have been experimenting with stolen technology lately." "Possible," Sella said slowly. "But pirates don't usually build engines this quiet. This ship barely leaves a trace behind it. If Disa hadn't caught it at exactly the right second, we would have missed it completely." Ren frowned at that. In his 22 years of military service, he had learned one very important lesson. Quiet ships were dangerous ships. Loud ships wanted to be seen. Quiet ships wanted something else. And that something else was rarely good news. "Hail it," Ren ordered. Disa tried, but no clear answer came back. It wasn't total silence either. There was some kind of signal coming through, but it sounded broken and confused, almost like the universal translator couldn't figure out what it was hearing. "Sir," Disa said, frowning at her screen. "The transmission is coming through, but I can't get a clean translation. It's like the language patterns don't match anything we have on record." Chella's antennae went completely still. "Every species inside Concord territory is registered," she said slowly. "Every species we have ever made contact with anyway." A small chill ran through Ren. It was the kind of chill that only came from facing something completely unknown. He had felt that same chill only twice before in his entire career. Once during the dangerous border conflicts with the Crackle Raiders, and once during humanity's very first contact with the Oswir Empire, a proud and violent people who believed that conquering others was simply the natural order of the universe. "Bring us to yellow alert," Ren said calmly. "Keep our distance for now. Let's just watch it." The crew moved with the kind of practiced calm that only comes from years of training and drills. The lights on the bridge shifted from a soft blue color to a low amber glow. There was no panic. Just quiet readiness, the way it should be on a well-trained ship. For almost a full hour, the strange ship did absolutely nothing. It simply sat there, far off in the distance, its unusual energy signal pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm, almost like it was breathing. Then, without warning, it moved. "Contact is accelerating," Disa said, her voice suddenly rising with shock. "Sir, that's not possible. Nothing that size should be able to move like that." The mysterious ship shot forward, covering a distance in just a few seconds that should have taken a normal Concorde ship several minutes to travel. It didn't seem to strain at all. It didn't wobble or shake. It simply moved, smooth and fast, almost like a flat stone skipping across the surface of still water. "Where is it going?" Ren asked, his voice sharp now. Chella's antennae shot up straight. "Sir, it's heading straight for the Praxis corridor. That's the trade route the Vantori convoy is using today. 12 civilian ships, no military escort at all." Ren's mind started racing. If this unknown ship turned out to be hostile, then 12 completely unarmed trade ships were about to become easy targets for whatever this thing was. There was no time left to sit and wonder about mysteries. "All ships pursuit course now," Ren barked out. "Weapons on standby. I want eyes on that ship the second we're in range." The steadfast coil and its small escort of 4 smaller cruisers surged forward, engines burning hot. But even with their strongest military engines pushed to the limit, they simply could not match the strange ship's incredible speed. It pulled further and further ahead of them, shrinking down to a tiny dot, and then finally disappearing completely from the visual display. Even so, their sensors could still track its strange energy trail moving further and further away. "We're not going to reach the convoy before it gets there," the helm officer said, his voice grim. Ren gripped the edge of his console tightly. "Then we'll arrive right after," he said. "Increase speed anyway. I want to see what's left." The bridge fell silent except for the low, tired hum of engines pushed far past their normal limits. Every officer on that bridge braced themselves for the worst outcome imaginable. A convoy full of unarmed traders, caught in the open by something faster and stranger than anything the Conquered had ever recorded in its history, was not going to end well for anyone involved. And somewhere ahead of them, in the dark quiet of open space, that answer was already waiting. 20 minutes. That's how long it took the steadfast coil to reach the Praxis corridor after losing sight of the mystery ship. 20 minutes of dead silence on the bridge, broken only by the tired whine of engines pushed way past what they were built for. Nobody spoke much during that stretch. Nobody wanted to say out loud what they were all thinking. A convoy of unarmed traders doesn't survive an encounter with something that fast, something that quiet, something that just erases itself from radar the moment it wants to. But when they finally arrived, nothing about the scene matched what anyone had braced themselves for. There was no wreckage floating in space, no debris fields scattered for miles, no distress beacons crying out into the void. Instead, all 12 Vantori trade ships sat exactly where they were supposed to be, engines humming along steadily, cargo holds still sealed tight and untouched. On the surface, it almost looked like a completely normal day out on the trade route. Almost. Off to one side, floating dead in space, was a fast attack cruiser covered in fresh scorch marks. It belonged to the Crackle Raiders, a well-known group of pirates operating in this region. Its weapon systems weren't just damaged. They were fused together into useless slag like something had melted the metal itself. "Sir," Disa said, staring at her screen with wide eyes. According to the convoy's own distress logs, there were 3 raider ships in this area just 10 minutes ago. Now there's only one and it's completely disabled. Where did the other 2 go? Chella checked her instruments and went very still, the way she always did right before delivering bad news. "Debris field," she said quietly. 600 kilometers out. That's what's left of them." Ren turned toward the main window and looked out into the dark. Far ahead, small and quiet, almost like it had nowhere else to be, sat the mystery ship. It hovered near the lead trade vessel, patient, unmoving, like it was simply waiting for someone to notice it was there. "Hail the convoy," Ren ordered. "I want to know exactly what happened out here." The response came through fast. It was the Vantori trade captain, and his voice was shaking with a strange mix of relief and confusion. The kind of voice you hear from someone who just watched something they still don't fully believe. "Admiral, we were attacked," the captain said. 3 raiders jumped out of a hidden point, weapons hot, demanding tribute. We thought that was it for us. We thought we were finished. Then that ship appeared out of nowhere. It moved between us and the raiders before we even had time to send out a proper warning. I have never seen anything fight like that in my entire life. It took down 2 of them in seconds and crippled the 3rd without firing anything I would call a normal weapon. No visible beam, no visible shot. The raider ships just stopped working. All at once, Ren felt his brow ridges tighten even further. "Did you get a good look at the pilot? Any kind of communication at all?" "One message, Admiral. Very short. It said, 'You are safe now. Continue your route.' Then it went completely quiet." "What language was it spoken in?" There was a pause on the line, long enough that Ren almost thought the signal had dropped. "That's the strange part, sir," the captain finally said. "It was Terran. Plain, standard Terran, the kind of dialect humans use when trading with outsiders. But that can't be a human ship, Admiral. Everyone knows human vessels are limited by treaty. Their patrol craft are slow, lightly armed, mostly built for surveying planets and handling diplomatic trips. This thing took out 3 armed raiders without taking a single scratch in return. That ship cannot be Terran." Ren looked again at the small, silent shape floating near the convoy. Small, quiet, impossibly fast, impossibly strong. And now, apparently, speaking with what sounded exactly like a human accent. He had actually been part of the diplomatic team years earlier, when the Concord finalized what everyone called the Terran Restriction Accord. He remembered those meetings clearly. Humanity was still considered young in galactic terms, brash, still recovering from centuries of fighting among themselves before they ever reached the stars. The older, more established species had worried, quietly but firmly, that if humans were allowed to build up their military without any limits, it could throw off the delicate balance of power that kept the peace between the conquered and dangerous rivals like the Oswir Empire. So humanity had agreed, somewhat reluctantly according to the old reports Ren had read, to limit the size of their warships, the strength of their weapons, and the total number of vessels in their fleet. In exchange, they were given full membership in the Conquered, trade rights across the galaxy, and a seat, however small, at the table where the big decisions got made. The ship sitting in front of him right now broke every single one of those agreed limits, if the convoy captain's account was even close to accurate. "Sela," Ren said quietly, not taking his eyes off the strange vessel. "Run every database check you can think of. Cross-reference the hull shape, the energy signature, the way it fights. I want to know if there is any record anywhere of a human ship matching this profile." Chella's fingers moved fast across her console. The bridge crew waited in tense silence, everyone watching the strange, quiet ship drift near the convoy, like it had all the time in the universe. Finally, Sela looked up. "Nothing, sir. Not in Concord records. Not in the shared trade registry. Not even a rumor buried somewhere in the diplomatic archives." "So either it's not human," Ren said slowly, "or humanity has been hiding something." Neither option felt comfortable to sit with. "Sir," Disa cut in suddenly, "the ship is hailing us directly." Ren straightened his back. "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a voice came through, calm and steady, carrying a faint human accent Ren had heard before in a handful of past diplomatic meetings. It was a woman's voice. "Conquered vessel, steadfast coil. This is the scout ship Wayfarer. I want to thank you for your quick response to the convoy's distress call. Unfortunately, it looks like I got here first." Ren glanced at Sela before answering carefully. "Wayfarer, this is Admiral Ren Seiss. Please identify your registration. Our records show no vessel matching your description anywhere in our systems." There was a short pause before the voice returned. "I'm registered under an independent survey license, Admiral. Human civilian, not military. A civilian ship destroyed 2 armed raiders and disabled a 3rd without a scratch," Ren said flatly. "That's an impressive feat for a survey vessel." Another pause, this one slightly longer. "I had good equipment and a bit of luck, Admiral. I'd rather not get into the details over an open channel, if that's all right with you. Wren's brow ridges deepened again. The woman's tone stayed polite, even friendly, but there was something underneath it. Something careful, like a person choosing every single word before letting it out. I'll need you to dock with the steadfast coil for a formal interview, Wren said. Standard procedure after an armed engagement inside conquered territory. I understand the concern, Admiral, but I'm afraid I have another survey assignment waiting. I really can't stay. Wayfarer, I must insist. But the ship was already moving, not fast this time. Almost lazily, drifting away from the convoy and back out toward open space, like it had all the time in the world and none of Wren's urgency mattered at all. Then, in the space of a single second, it vanished. No warp flash, no drive trail. It was simply gone, the exact same way it had appeared in the first place. The bridge went completely silent. Sir, Disa finally said, her voice small. I have no idea how it did that. There's no warp signature at all. It's like it just stopped existing in this spot and started existing somewhere else entirely. Wren stared at the empty patch of space where the ship had been floating just moments before. He thought about the treaty, about the careful limits placed on human technology, about the promises human diplomats had made, that their species would never build anything beyond what the Concord had agreed to, and he found himself wondering for the first time just how many other quiet little survey ships might be sitting out there in conquered space right now, watching, waiting, ready to appear exactly when needed, and vanish just as fast. News travels fast in space, especially when it involves a ship that shouldn't exist. 3 days after the incident at the Praxis corridor, Admiral Wren Kaez found himself standing inside the Concord Command Council chamber, high above the slowly turning planet of Halvorn Prime. This wasn't some small meeting room. It was a huge circular hall, ringed with tall windows that looked out over the planet below, and packed with delegates from a dozen different alien worlds, all sitting at curved tables watching, judging, waiting. Some of the delegates leaned forward with open curiosity. Others sat back with arms crossed, clearly suspicious before a single word had even been spoken. That's the thing about a council made up of a dozen different species. Everyone reads a situation a little differently, and almost nobody agrees right away. At the center of the chamber stood a man everyone in the room had been waiting to see. His name was Julian Reyes, the Terran ambassador, a middle-aged human dressed in a simple gray suit. No medals, no rank badges. Just the plain, understated style humans preferred for these kinds of official occasions. He looked calm, almost relaxed. Like none of this bothered him at all, even as Wren's full report about the mystery ship was read out loud for the entire chamber to hear. The moment the reading finished, a delegate from the Kraxil species slammed a clawed hand down on his table so hard it echoed through the room. He had broad shoulders and mottled purple skin, and his voice came out sharp and angry. This is a clear violation of the Terran Restriction Accord, he said. A vessel matching no known specification, using weapons and stealth far beyond agreed limits, operating freely inside Concord territory without proper registration. I demand an explanation, Ambassador. Julian didn't flinch. Not even a little. I understand your concern, Delegate, he said calmly. But I want to point something out. That vessel defended a civilian convoy from an armed attack. It caused no harm to any Concord citizen. If anything, it prevented harm from happening. That is not the point, the Kraxil delegate snapped back. The point is that this ship should not exist at all under our current agreements. If humanity has been secretly building vessels beyond treaty limits, that is a direct threat to the balance of power every species in this room has worked hard to maintain. A wave of quiet murmurs rolled through the chamber. Several delegates nodded along in agreement. Others, mostly from smaller species who had quietly benefited from human trade and technology over the years, looked far more uncertain, clearly not wanting to jump to conclusions too quickly. Wren watched Julian carefully during all of this. The ambassador's calm expression never really cracked, but there was something small flickering behind his eyes. Not guilt, exactly. Not fear either. It looked more like patience. The kind of patience a parent shows a child who's about to learn a hard lesson the hard way. I cannot confirm or deny the exact origin of the vessel described in Admiral Caesar's report, Julian said carefully, choosing every word like it mattered, because it did. What I can tell you is that humanity has honored every single term of the Terran Restriction Accord exactly as it was written. As it was written, the Craxil delegate repeated slowly, his voice thick with suspicion. That is a very careful choice of words, Ambassador. Julian offered a small, polite smile. I'm a diplomat, delegate. Careful words are part of the job description. That answer didn't calm the room down. If anything, it lit a fire under it. The chamber erupted into overlapping arguments, delegates talking over each other, some demanding immediate sanctions against humanity right then and there, others urging everyone to slow down and investigate further before jumping to any harsh decisions. Ren stayed quiet through most of it, watching, listening, trying to catch the deeper currents running underneath all the noise. He had spent years dealing with the Oswer Empire along the dangerous border regions, and if there was one thing he had learned from all that experience, it was this. Peace built on underestimating your opponent is peace built on sand. It looks solid until the moment it isn't. The meeting ended without any real decision being reached. The Craxil delegate wanted harsh sanctions right away. Another delegate, from the Vantori people whose convoy had actually been saved, wanted to give the mystery ship some kind of official reward instead. In the end, the council did the one thing large political bodies are always really good at doing. They formed a committee to look into it further. Ren was placed in charge of that committee, alongside Shella and, much to his surprise, Ambassador Julian Reyes himself. You volunteered for this? Ren asked as the three of them walked together down the quiet hallway just outside the chamber. I asked to be included, Julian said simply. It seemed smarter to have a human voice in the room instead of letting everyone else guess at our intentions without any real context to work from. And will you actually give us that context? Shella asked, her antennae tilting with obvious curiosity. Julian smiled faintly. As much as I'm allowed to, yes. They set up their investigation aboard the Steadfast Coil, since it was the ship that had actually encountered the Wayfarer directly. Over the next several days, Ren's crew went digging through every scrap of sensor data they could find, every old record, every half-forgotten rumor from trade routes scattered across conquered space. Slowly, piece by piece, a bigger picture started coming together, even if it was still far from complete. There had been other sightings before this one, not many, not well documented, but enough, once someone actually knew what to look for, to form a real pattern. A civilian survey ship had helped save a mining colony from an asteroid collision 3 years earlier, redirecting a massive rock using a tractor beam far stronger than anything on public record. A research vessel had, according to one badly garbled distress call, driven off a group of space pirates near the Denth Belt without firing a single shot anyone could clearly identify. A diplomatic courier had somehow crossed a distance of 4 light years in under 2 hours, a speed that should have been physically impossible even for the fastest ship the Conquered had ever built. Taken alone, each of these strange stories could be explained away easily enough. Coincidence, exaggeration, faulty sensors reading things wrong. But taken together, all at once, they painted a very different picture. A hidden fleet. Small in number maybe, but powerful in a way that broke every rule the treaty had ever put in place, quietly operating along the edges of conquered space for years without anyone noticing. How long has this been going on? Ren finally asked, staring at the growing timeline Sella had pulled together on the main screen. Best guess based on the earliest confirmed sighting we've found so far, Sella said slowly. At least 5 years, possibly longer. There could easily be incidents we haven't even found yet, especially out in the less traveled regions of space. Ren turned to look at Julian, who had been quietly studying the same data without much reaction showing on his face at all. Ambassador, Ren said, 5 years ago is roughly when the Terran Restriction Accord was signed. That timing feels like a lot more than simple coincidence to me. Julian set down the data pad he had been holding. He stayed quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing exactly how much he was ready to say out loud. Admiral, may I tell you something about human history? He asked, Ren nodded, genuinely curious despite everything. Humanity spent most of its history fighting itself, Julian began. Different nations, different peoples fighting over land, resources, ideas, sometimes over nothing at all except old grudges passed down through generations. We nearly destroyed our own homeworld more than once. It took centuries of painful lessons before we finally learned how to work together instead of tearing each other apart. That's true of many species, Sela said gently. The Vanturi had their own age of conflict long before we ever joined the wider galaxy. I know, Julian said. But there's one particular lesson humanity learned very deeply. A lesson that still shapes how we approach the rest of the galaxy today, now that we're part of it. We learned that peace agreements, even ones signed with the very best intentions, sometimes fail anyway. We learned that a nation which disarms completely, trusting entirely in the good faith of others, can end up in a very dangerous position if that trust ever turns out to be misplaced. Ren's brow ridges lowered slightly, a quiet expression of careful attention. You're saying humanity signed the restriction accord but never fully trusted it to hold. I'm saying humanity has a long memory, Julian said simply. And in that one quiet sentence, the entire investigation suddenly took a much darker, much more serious turn than anyone in that room had expected. Ren didn't say anything right away. He just stood there in the dim light of the briefing room, letting Julian's words settle over him. A nation with a long memory. That single sentence carried more weight than an entire stack of reports ever could. I'm saying humanity has a long memory, Julian repeated, quieter this time. When we joined the Conquered, we were the youngest member species in this galaxy. The weakest, by almost every measure anyone used to judge these things. We agreed to limit our military because it felt like the right move. A gesture of good faith, meant to earn our place at the table. But some of us, not everyone, but some, remembered every single time in our own past when good faith alone wasn't enough to stop a disaster from happening. So a decision was made, Ren said slowly, putting the pieces together out loud. Quietly. At the very top of your government. To prepare for the chance that peace might not actually hold. By building ships that break the treaty, Sela added, her tone flat. By building ships that exist outside the treaty's reach, Julian corrected gently. The accord limits the size, the weapon strength, and the total number of ships in humanity's declared military. It says nothing at all about independent research programs, or civilian survey initiatives, or any other kind of vessel that was never clearly defined anywhere in the treaty's original language. Chella let out a soft, sharp click, the sound she made when something finally clicked into place for her. Loopholes. Careful reading, Julian said, though there was a trace of something close to guilt hiding underneath his calm tone. I won't pretend it's a comfortable arrangement, even for people like me who genuinely support it. But humanity has watched the Oswir Empire grow more aggressive along the border for years now. Their fleet drills keep getting bigger. Their public rhetoric keeps getting harsher. Their patience with smaller, weaker species keeps getting thinner every year. We did not want to be caught standing there helpless if that aggression ever turned outward toward us, or toward anyone else in this Conquered. Ren stayed quiet for a while, turning it all over in his head. Part of him understood the logic completely. He had spent his entire career watching that same dangerous border, watching the same slow, creeping threat grow year after year. But another part of him, the part that had genuinely believed in the Conquered's ideals of open trust between member species, felt a deep, uncomfortable unease about the idea of an entire hidden fleet operating in the shadows, unseen, unaccountable to anyone but itself. How large is this fleet? Ren finally asked. Truthfully, Julian met his eyes and held them steady. I don't have full clearance to answer that, Admiral, and I mean that honestly, not as some kind of dodge. Even inside human command structures, full knowledge of this program is limited to a very small circle of people. That's not exactly reassuring, Chella muttered under her breath. I know, Julian said, but I can tell you this much. The program was never meant to stay secret forever. It was built to be ready quietly, in case it was ever truly needed. And so far, in every single case we know about, it has only ever been used to protect people, never once to attack anyone. Ren thought back to the raider ships disabled near the convoy, to the calm, careful voice of the Wayfarer's pilot, to that one simple message she had left behind. You are safe now. Continue your route. It hadn't sounded like the words of someone looking for a fight, but it also didn't erase the plain fact that an entire fleet had been built and hidden away from the very allies humanity had sworn to trust completely. I need to bring this to the Council, Ren said finally. I understand, Julian said without any pushback at all. I'd expect nothing less from you. The investigation dragged on for another full week after that conversation, though it mostly just confirmed the pattern they had already uncovered, rather than revealing anything brand new. The hidden fleet, whatever its true size actually turned out to be, stayed elusive the entire time, showing up only exactly when it was needed and disappearing just as fast, leaving behind nothing but rescued convoys and a long trail of unanswered questions. Then, on the 8th day, everything changed at once. Ren was going through reports alone in his quarters when Disa's voice suddenly cut through the comm system, tight with urgency in a way he hadn't heard from her before. Admiral, you need to see this right now. Emergency broadcast just came in from the Threndar system. Ren was on the bridge within seconds. The main screen showed a badly garbled transmission, the image breaking apart every few seconds, but the words coming through were clear enough to understand. Under attack. Oswir warships. No warning given. Requesting immediate assistance. Repeat. Threndar colony is under attack. Sela was already pulling up a star chart, her hands moving fast. Threndar is a joint colony, sir. Mixed population. Mostly Vani and Catherine settlers plus a small human diplomatic outpost. It's close to the border, but it has never once been a military target before. There's no real strategic value out there beyond a bit of mining. Oswir doesn't need strategic value, Ren said grimly, already moving toward the command chair. They just need an excuse. His mind jumped straight back to the council meeting, to the tense arguments about the mystery ship, to the accusations flying back and forth about treaty violations and hidden threats. If word of the hidden human fleet had somehow leaked out and reached Oswir ears, even in a twisted, incomplete form, it might have been exactly the kind of provocation their most aggressive commanders had been waiting years for. How many ships in the attacking force? Ren asked sharply. Unclear, sir. The broadcast keeps cutting out on us. At least 6 confirmed so far, possibly more. And our nearest response fleet? 3 days out, at best possible speed. Ren's jaw tightened. 3 days was far too long for a colony under direct active attack right now. The Threndar settlers, civilian and lightly defended at best, would not survive that long against a determined Oswir assault force, bearing down on them with full weapons hot. Get Ambassador Reyes to the bridge, Ren ordered. Now. Julian arrived within minutes, his usual calm expression replaced by something sharper, more focused than Ren had ever seen on him before. He listened to the full situation report without a single interruption, his eyes narrowing tighter and tighter as Sela described the size of the attacking force. There's a human diplomatic outpost on Threndar, Julian said quietly once she finished. 6 people, a small research team and a junior liaison officer. I'm aware, Ren said. Ambassador, I need to know something right now. Is there any chance your hidden fleet can respond to this faster than we can? Julian went completely silent for a long moment, clearly weighing the cost of even answering that question against the cost of 6 human lives and the lives of every Vani and Cathran settler standing right beside them on that colony. I don't have direct authority to call them in, Julian said finally. But I can send a message. Whether it actually reaches anyone, and whether anyone chooses to respond at all, isn't something I can promise you, Admiral. Then send it, Ren said without hesitation. Whatever small chance we have, we take it. Julian moved to an isolated terminal at the edge of the bridge, his fingers moving fast across the interface, punching in a sequence of commands Ren didn't recognize at all. After a moment, a small confirmation light blinked once on the screen. It's sent, Julian said. Now we wait and hope. The steadfast coil set course for Threndar at maximum speed, though everyone on that bridge understood the hard truth. They would probably arrive too late to matter. Still, Ren refused to just sit there and do nothing. If nothing else, his ship could serve as a witness, and maybe, if fortune allowed it, some kind of backup for whatever aid might arrive first. Hours crawled by in tense silence, broken only by static-filled updates coming through the dying colony broadcast. The Osweir fleet had already begun bombarding the colony's outer defense platforms. Casualties were climbing fast. Threndar's small defense force, just 3 lightly armed patrol ships, had already been wiped out trying to buy a little extra time for evacuation. Then, 20 minutes before the steadfast coil was projected to arrive, the broadcast suddenly changed. "Wait," the panicked voice of the colony's communications officer cut through the static. "Wait, there's something new on our scanners. Unidentified contact approaching from... I don't understand these readings. It's just one ship. It's heading straight for the Osweir fleet." Ren leaned forward fast, his heart pounding despite years of hard-earned discipline. "Put everything through now. I want every scrap of that broadcast on our main screen." The image flickered back to life, shaky and distant, clearly recorded from some colony surface camera pointed up at the sky. Explosions bloomed silently in the upper atmosphere, the aftermath of the Osweir bombardment. And right there, cutting straight through the chaos, was a single small shape moving with impossible speed and precision, weaving between enemy warships like a hawk cutting through a flock of crows. "That's it," Sella breathed. "Sir, that's the same energy signature. That's the Wayfarer." On the screen, the small ship struck the lead Osweir cruiser with something that left no visible weapon trail at all, just a sudden flare of light, and the cruiser's engines died instantly, leaving it drifting powerless in orbit like a dead thing. The colony's communications officer let out a stunned, disbelieving laugh through all the static. "It's just one ship," he said. "One ship, and it's tearing them apart." Ren stared at the screen, watching a single defiant vessel hold the line against an entire invasion fleet, buying desperate time for a colony that should have already fallen by now. He turned to Julian, who was watching the same footage with an expression Ren couldn't quite read, somewhere between deep pride and quiet, gnawing worry. "That's not going to be enough," Ren said. "One ship, however capable it is, can't hold off 6 warships forever." "No," Julian agreed softly. "It can't." "Then what happens next?" Julian looked back at him, and for the first time since Ren had met the man, his carefully controlled expression cracked, just slightly, revealing something underneath that looked almost like relief. "Now," Julian said quietly, "we find out how big humanity's promise really is." Aboard the Osweir flagship Iron Verdict, Warlord Dreth Calvern watched his tactical display with growing disbelief. Dreth was a broad, heavily armored being with dark gray skin and eyes the color of dying embers, a man who had spent 30 years climbing the ranks of the Osweir military. In all that time, he had never once doubted the natural order of the galaxy. The strong ruled, the weak served. Any species too soft to defend itself deserved whatever fate found it. He had picked Threndar carefully. Weak defenses, valuable mining resources, a mixed population that included, most importantly, a small human diplomatic presence. Word had reached Osweir intelligence, garbled and secondhand, of rumors swirling through conquered space about a hidden human fleet violating the restriction accord. Dreth hadn't fully believed those rumors. He had studied humanity's declared military strength extensively, and by every measure his analysts could produce, it looked unimpressive. Small ships, limited weapons, a species that had only recently stopped fighting itself long enough to join the wider galaxy. If humanity truly had hidden strength somewhere, Dreth had reasoned, then a controlled, limited strike on an undefended human outpost would either expose that strength or prove the rumors false once and for all. Either way, valuable information would be gained. He had not expected a single ship to appear out of nowhere and start systematically dismantling his entire fleet. "Report!" Dreth roared from his command deck as another explosion rocked the ship's outer hull sensors. "Warlord, the Cathinus has lost all engine power. The Sky Reaver is drifting, weapons offline. We cannot get a stable targeting lock on the enemy vessel. It moves too fast. Our sensors can't hold a reading on its position." One ship, Dreth snarled, staring at the tactical display where a single small icon danced circles around his much larger fleet. One single ship is doing this to us. Yes, Warlord. His claws dug hard into the arm of his command chair. 30 years of military doctrine told him this shouldn't be possible. A single small vessel, however advanced it might be, should not be able to disable warships 3 and 4 times its size without taking damage in return. And yet, watching that tactical display, he saw absolutely no evidence the enemy ship had been hit even once. Concentrate all remaining fire on that single point, Dreth ordered. All ships, full spread pattern. It cannot dodge everything at once. The remaining 4 Oswir warships opened fire together, filling the space around the small human ship with a storm of energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. For one brief heartbeat, Dreth allowed himself to believe it might finally be enough. Then the storm of fire simply passed through empty space, and the small ship reappeared directly behind his own flagship, close enough that his sensors screamed a collision warning before falling completely silent as something struck the Iron Verdict's weapons array, disabling it instantly, without so much as a visible flash of impact. "Warlord, weapons are offline," his tactical officer shouted, his voice cracking with something Dreth had never once heard from him before. Fear. Dreth stared at the readout in disbelief, then turned his attention to a single transmission that had just come through on the comm channel. Calm, unhurried, carrying a faint human accent. "Oswir Fleet Commander, this is Scout Ship Wayfarer. You are conducting an unprovoked attack on a civilian colony. I am requesting one final time that you withdraw." Dreth slammed his fist against the console, static from his own fury crackling through his voice as he opened a return channel. "You dare address me with demands? Do you know who I am? I know you're the commander of a fleet that just lost weapons capability on 3 ships and full engine function on 2 more, without landing a single hit on the vessel responsible." The voice replied, calm and almost gentle. "I'd suggest that matters more right now than titles." Dreth's ember-colored eyes burned brighter with rage. "This is a single ship. A single, small, insignificant ship. You cannot hold this position forever. My reinforcements are already inbound." There was a pause on the other end of the channel, and when the voice returned, it carried something new. Something that sent a genuine chill through even Dreth's battle-hardened nerves. "So are mine," the voice said. "I'd suggest you reconsider your position before they arrive." The channel closed. Dreth turned to his tactical officer, forcing his voice into something resembling calm command. "Status on our reinforcement fleet." "Still 4 hours out, Warlord." Dreth looked back at the tactical display, at the single small icon that had, through means he still couldn't fully comprehend, brought 4 of his warships to a complete standstill. He thought of the rumors about a hidden human fleet, rumors he had dismissed outright as unreliable intelligence chatter. He was beginning for the first time to seriously reconsider that dismissal. Aboard the steadfast coil, still hours away from Threndar, Wren watched the increasingly desperate updates streaming in through the colony's surface broadcast, with a growing sense of disbelief. "She's still holding," Sella said, her antennae twitching rapidly as she monitored the incoming data. 4 Oswir ships disabled or crippled, and the Wayfarer hasn't taken a single confirmed hit. "How is that even possible?" Wren asked, half to himself. Julian, standing quietly near the tactical station, finally spoke up. "The Wayfarer class uses a technology we call phase displacement. I probably shouldn't say much more than that, but essentially, the ship can shift its position relative to incoming fire faster than conventional weapons can ever track. It's not invulnerable, but it's extremely difficult to hit." Wren stared at him. "That's not a small technological advantage, Ambassador. That's a generational leap beyond anything the Concord currently has." "I'm aware," Julian said quietly. Before Wren could press further, Deesa's voice cut sharply through his thoughts, urgent and tight. "Sir, long-range sensors are picking up a large contact approaching Threndar from the far side of the system. It's big, sir, really big." Wren's stomach tightened instantly. "Oswir reinforcements." "Checking now," Disa said, fingers flying across her console. A moment later, her expression shifted from worry to something closer to pure shock. Sir, this doesn't match any signature we have on record. The energy profile it's similar to the Wayfarers but on a massive scale. I'm reading multiple distinct contacts inside the larger signature. Sir, I think this is a fleet. The bridge went completely quiet. Every single eye turned toward Julian, who was staring at the same readout with an expression of quiet, careful satisfaction. Ambassador, Wren said slowly. Is that your fleet? Julian allowed himself a small, tired smile. I believe it might be, Admiral. Dreth Calvorn stared at his own tactical display in growing horror as the massive new contact resolved itself into dozens, then hundreds of individual ship signatures, spreading out in a formation that could only be described as completely overwhelming. That's not possible, his tactical officer whispered, his voice barely holding together. Warlord, that fleet size, it's larger than our entire Threndar assault force. It's larger than most fleets we've ever fielded in a single engagement period. Dreth felt something he hadn't felt in 30 years of military service. Genuine cold fear. He had come to Threndar expecting an easy conquest against a weak, poorly defended colony. He had told himself the rumors of hidden human strength were exaggeration or propaganda, or simple misinformation being spread by nervous rivals. He now understood with terrible clarity that he had been catastrophically wrong. Orders, Warlord? His tactical officer asked, voice tight with barely controlled panic. Dreth stared at the approaching fleet for a long moment, his mind racing through every option available to him, all of which led to the exact same grim conclusion. His 4 remaining warships were already crippled or fully disabled. His reinforcements were still hours away, and even once they finally arrived, they would face a force many times their size, armed with technology his own scientists hadn't even theorized was possible yet. Full retreat, Dreth said quietly. All ships immediate withdrawal. Signal our reinforcement fleet to abort their approach. Warlord, retreating now means abandoning the Cathynus and the Sky Reaver. Their engines are still offline. Dreth's claws clenched tight against his command chair. Then we abandon them. I will not lose my entire remaining force just to prove a point that has already been proven, beyond any doubt. As his surviving ships began their desperate retreat, Dreth found himself staring one last time at the small, quiet shape of the Wayfarer, still hovering protectively over Threndar colony, waiting, patient, unhurried, as the massive human fleet drew closer behind it. He had come here believing humanity was weak, its declared restrictions a true measure of its actual strength. He was leaving with the certain knowledge that he had been played, deliberately and completely, by a species that had spent years quietly letting the entire galaxy underestimate it. As his flagship turned to flee, Dreth opened one final channel, not to the Wayfarer but to his own command staff, his voice carrying a warning he suspected would go unheeded by his superiors back home, but one he felt compelled to give regardless. Send word to Osweir High Command, he said grimly. Tell them everything we saw here today. Tell them the rumors about the humans were true and worse than we imagined. And tell them, whatever plans exist for testing human strength further, they should be abandoned immediately. His tactical officer hesitated. Do you believe they'll listen, Warlord? Dreth watched the massive human fleet continue its steady, unhurried approach on the tactical display, an overwhelming show of force that hadn't fired a single shot beyond what was needed to defend an undefended colony. No, he said quietly. I don't believe they will. Pride rarely listens to caution, even when caution just saved what remains of your fleet. 3 days later, the Concord Command Council convened an emergency session, and this time, the mood in the chamber was different from before. There was less outrage now, and far more fear. The kind of fear that comes from realizing the balance of power everyone assumed was stable had in fact been an illusion for years. Fleet Admiral Marcus Hale, commanding officer of the entire hidden program, stood before the council in a plain gray uniform, no unnecessary decoration at all. I won't waste this council's time pretending the decision to build this fleet was easy, he said, or that it came without real cost to the trust between humanity and our conquered allies. It wasn't easy, and it did have a cost. Every person who authorized that program understood we were taking a serious risk, both militarily and diplomatically, by keeping it hidden. Then why do it? The Craxil delegate demanded, though his earlier fury had cooled into something more measured now. Because humanity has learned, through hard and repeated experience, that peace maintained through weakness is peace that invites exactly the kind of aggression we've watched building along the Oswir border for years, Marcus said. We didn't build this fleet to threaten this council, or to break faith with our allies. We built it because we couldn't, in good conscience, leave ourselves and the smaller species we've come to consider friends and neighbors completely undefended against a threat we saw growing clearer every single year. The chamber fell silent for a long moment. Then slowly something shifted. Delegate after delegate spoke, weighing fear against the plain, undeniable fact that in 6 years of quiet operation, this fleet had never once been used for anything other than defense. Never a single act of aggression, never a single instance of conquest. In the end, the council chose not to pursue sanctions. Instead, they proposed something new: full disclosure, joint oversight of the fleet going forward, and in exchange, a formally amended treaty that finally reflected a more honest picture of humanity's real role in defending the conquered. It's a start, Marcus said afterward. Not a perfect resolution, but a real one. Trust takes time to rebuild, and I don't expect this council to extend that trust easily or quickly. But at least now we're building on honesty instead of secrecy. Later that day, in a quiet hallway just outside the chamber, Ren finally met the person behind it all. Captain Elena Cross, pilot of the Wayfarer. She looked, if anything, tired, the way any soldier looks after a long and dangerous mission, human or otherwise. I owe you my thanks, Ren said, and the thanks of the Concord, for what you did at Threndar. Elena offered a small, tired smile. I was just doing my job, Admiral. How long have you been doing this? Watching over colonies and trade routes alone without any recognition at all? 3 years this posting, she said. 2 more before that, just learning the ship, learning the role. It's not an easy life, honestly. Long stretches of quiet, watching and waiting, followed by short bursts of the kind of danger most people spend their whole careers trying to avoid. Why do it? Ren asked. You could have served in a far more conventional role. Safer, more recognized. Elena thought about the question for a moment before answering. I grew up hearing stories from my grandmother about a war on Earth, a long time before humanity ever reached the stars. She used to tell me about towns that thought they were safe, right up until the moment they weren't. About people who trusted that someone else would protect them, only to find out too late that no one was actually coming. She paused, looking out toward the slow turn of the planet below. I decided a long time ago that I'd rather be the person who comes than the person who waits and hopes someone else does. Ren was quiet for a moment, turning her words over carefully in his mind. He thought of his own home world, of the long, careful peace his people had built after their own turbulent history, and of how easily that kind of peace could be shattered by an aggressor who sensed weakness where there was none left to exploit. 3 weeks later, the Council formally ratified the amended Terran Defense Accord, establishing joint oversight of the hidden fleet, while officially acknowledging humanity's right to maintain a defensive force suited to the growing threats along the Concord's borders. It wasn't a perfect agreement. A handful of delegates still voted against it. But the majority carried the vote, recognizing that the galaxy they lived in had changed, whether every species in that chamber was entirely comfortable with that change or not. Along the Oswir border, patrols grew noticeably quieter in the months that followed. No major incursions were reported for the rest of the year. It wasn't peace exactly. It was something more fragile and more watchful than that. But it held. Ren went back to his regular patrol duties along the Halvorn expanse, though he found himself watching the far edges of his sensor range a little more closely than before, wondering, more often than he used to, what kind of quiet, unseen strength might still be waiting just beyond the reach of his instruments, ready to answer the moment it was ever truly needed. He never saw the Wayfarer again, but reports occasionally surfaced from distant systems, a convoy saved from raiders near the Denth Belt, A mining colony's evacuation aided during an unexpected asteroid collision. A diplomatic envoy escorted safely through contested space during a tense standoff. Always the same pattern, always quiet, always without ever seeking thanks or recognition. On quiet nights aboard the steadfast Coil, Ren liked to imagine that somewhere out in that vast, dark expanse, a single small ship continued its patient watch, ready to appear exactly when needed, and vanish just as fast, carrying with it a promise that had once seemed impossible to believe and now felt against all odds like something the galaxy could finally begin to trust. You are safe now. It was, Ren had come to understand, never just a message meant for one frightened convoy on an ordinary patrol day. It was a promise humanity had quietly made to the entire galaxy, long before anyone else had known to listen for it, and one they intended, however imperfectly, to keep.